I in New York. I'm Sue Goodwin.
Don't let us hang around this town and let what others say come true. We're just good for nothing. They all feel cute. A boy's grown up mischief. Now we can hardly stand.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm having a few audio difficulties. Here I am. I hope you can hear me. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Darker Than Blue. I am Jackie Lukman, your host, and if I'm talking to you, it must be Friday at 5 o'clock. And yep, this is Darker Than Blue. Woo! Today has been a day. I am hoping that your Holy Week has been indeed holy and revelatory and resurrecting certain things that maybe you pushed aside, some things that you thought you didn't have time to do, things that you ignored that you needed to do for yourself. I hope those good things for you have been resurrected, revived in your life, and you recommit to them during this Holy Week, because I sure did. And man, what an opportunity this is to talk about one of those things, because I think we need to talk about COVID and vaccine denialism and how it legitimized RFK Jr. and the eugenics plan that he is now threatening to institutionalize as the head of the Department of Health and Human Services. But first, I want to shout out everybody listening. Hello, dear listeners on WPFW 89.3 FM in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area. Shout out to you who are listening online at WPFWFM.org. Shout out to all my comrades, friends, supporters on Black Liberation Media on YouTube watching right now, to all my patrons on patreon.com/LukmanNation, LukMannation. That is where you can support this work that I do on this station and everywhere else throughout all the other platforms. Shout out to my family, Aunt Clara and Uncle Junie, who used WPFW for years and WOL before it to shout each other out. My aunt, my uncle, and my mom, who passed in 1996, they would call into the station every day and shout each other out as they were going to work. So I am resurrecting that tradition with my family. Shout out to Aunt Clara, Uncle Junie, and Stefan. Love y'all, and all my family listening and watching all over the place in Richmond, in Detroit, Michigan. You know who you are. I love you so much. Let's get into this discussion, because this thing has been burning in my soul, as we say in the liberation theology Christian tradition. Because I want to start by talking about a July 2023 monologue that I wrote for By Any Means Necessary. And I said that at the time that Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s comments that he made about a genetic predisposition to COVID-19 was the racist dismissal of racist capitalism that we did not need at the time. And I want to read that monologue to you. So let me tell you what I said then in 2023 now. I said then that I know RFK Jr.'s opinions about COVID-19 and the vaccines related to it were still very raw then, and they still are now, at least in the US, where this government did absolutely nothing under two presidential administrations to protect people and save lives in the midst of a global pandemic. But let me just be the one to say that if you were afraid to, Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s comments, because remember, he ran for president against or ran for the nomination against Biden, his comments then, RFK Jr.'s comments about the virus, were just plain wackadoodle then. In a video posted by the New York Post, Kennedy Jr. was seen speaking at what was described as a press event in New York City. And he said to his dinner companions at that event, quote, COVID-19, there's an argument that it is ethnically targeted. COVID-19 attacks certain races disproportionately. Kennedy said that. He was caught on tape saying it. He went further to say COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and Black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. He said it. RFK Jr. said it, not me. I'm just repeating what that crackpot said. Now, then he tried to explain himself in a tweet saying, quote, the New York Post story is mistaken. I have never, ever suggested that the COVID-19 virus was targeted to spare Jews. I accurately pointed out during an off-the-record conversation that the U.S. and other governments are developing ethnically targeted bioweapons, and that a 2021 study of the COVID-19 virus shows that COVID-19 appears to disproportionately affect certain races, since the furin-cleave docking site is most compatible with Blacks and Caucasians, and least compatible with ethnic Chinese, Finns, the Finnish people, and Ashkenazi Jews. In that sense, again, this is RFK Jr.'s tweet. These are not my comments. I am reading to you what he said. He said, in that sense, it serves as a kind of proof of concept for ethnically targeted bioweapons. I do not believe and never implied that the ethnic effect was deliberately engineered, end quote. Well, yes, he did say that. Despite him trying to walk it back, he flat out lied. But Kennedy cited this July 2020 study in that tweet that he claimed backed up his comments. But the background of the study, conducted very early in the pandemic, said that, quote, morbidity and mortality due to COVID-19 rise dramatically with age and coexisting health conditions, including cancer and cardiovascular diseases. Human genetic factors may contribute to the extremely high transmissibility of SARS-CoV-2 and to the relentlessly progressive disease observed in a small but significant proportion of infected individuals, quote, or end quote. But the background statement goes on to clearly state, quote, these are the exact words from the background. These human genetic factors are largely unknown. Now, I go on to say in this monologue that I'm not going to pretend to be a biochemist like Kennedy Jr. was trying to do with his dumb comments. I wasn't trying to be a biochemist then, and I'm not trying to be a biochemist now. But I can tell you that it wasn't genetics, but the capitalist exploitation of low-wage workers who are predominantly Black and Hispanic and Chicano and Mexico, and the racial biases and rugged individualism of white people that contributed to the high rates of COVID deaths of Black and then white people in the US. I go on to explain in this monologue from 2023 that the Mayo Clinic had outlined why Black, Indigenous, Alaska Native, and other racial and ethnic minorities in the United States have had higher rates of infection, hospital stays, and death caused by the COVID-19 virus than white and non-so-called Hispanic people. The unfair and unjust treatment based on race that non-white Americans experience, I said then, when it is a part of a culture, can play a part in poor health. Other medical conditions are exacerbated or may even be caused by the stress of dealing with racial discrimination, racial violence, racial terrorism, which can take a toll on the body. This stress has been linked to heart disease, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and kidney or liver disease. Kidney disease, something I'm intimately familiar with. Any of these diseases can raise the risk of severe illness with COVID-19. Having a job that is considered essential, I said then, cannot be done remotely or involves public interaction, increases exposure to and the risk of getting the COVID-19 virus. In the US in 2018, about 20% of employed Hispanic and Black men worked in the service industry. That was compared with 13% of either Asian American or non-Hispanic white men. Labor statistics from 2018 found that Black people made up about 36% of workers in nursing, but Black people were only 12% of the overall workforce in 2018. Location, where people live, and who they live with can make it hard to avoid getting COVID-19. People in racial and ethnic minority groups might be more likely to live in homes with many family members of various ages. They're also more likely to live in crowded conditions and heavily populated areas like New York City and Southeast Washington, D.C. This can make it hard to stay at a distance from others, and access to health care, which many members of racial and ethnic minority groups facing racial discrimination and economic deprivation connected to it and the hardship that brings it, are more likely to face barriers to accessing care. These are the reasons Black and other marginalized people got sick and died from COVID-19 in disproportionate numbers, I said in 2023. Then I point out that psychologists at the University of Georgia's Department of Social Science and Medicine conducted what was shown, a study that was shown that when white people in the US were more aware of racial disparities in COVID-19, they were less fearful of the virus. The study also noted that there was, quote, literally from the study, not making these words up, in the study, less empathy for people who are vulnerable to COVID-19 and evidence of reduced support for safety precautions to prevent the spread of COVID-19, end quote, directly from the study. That study also stated that white US residents who believed COVID-19 racial disparities were a result of genetic susceptibility were more likely not to adhere to CDC COVID-19 safety recommendations for themselves. So in the US, more Black and other marginalized non-white people got sick and died from COVID-19, not because of a genetic predisposition, but because of racist capitalist exploitation. And then more white people started to get sick and die because when they saw that more Black and non-white people were dying, they didn't care about precautions to keep themselves safe, especially if they believed more Black people died because of our genetics. So they demanded that the economy be opened back up, which of course only exposed more white people to the virus, causing a rise in infection and death among them. As to the rest of Kennedy's comments, I said that we've talked extensively on By Any Means Necessary about the efforts the Chinese government undertook to protect its people and to stop the spread of the virus compared to the abysmal action this government took and the respective death tolls from COVID-19 in the two countries that reflected the efficacy or lack thereof of those efforts. And the bit about Ashkenazi Jews, I don't know even what to call that other than exactly what it sounds like. That's what I said about RFK's comments in July of 2023. I went on to say that Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s comments are not productive or even intelligent contributions to the discourse we need to have regarding this government's lack of a coordinated and humanitarian response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Peddling the genetic predisposition to COVID-19 trope, rather than connecting those excess deaths to their well documented causes, which were capitalism and racism, is no better than the unscientific and dangerous response to the pandemic from Trump or Biden. That was the monologue I wrote. That's what I said about RFK Jr. and his wackadoodle comments about COVID-19 in July of 2023. And I also expanded on this topic in a related article that I wrote that was published in Black Agenda Report, also in July 2023, entitled RFK Jr., It's Not Genetics, It's Racial Capitalism. Now, I'm not going to read that article because, like the way I talk, I also write in a very long-winded fashion. So I invite you, and I actually urge you to go to blackagendareport.com to read the article yourself, because in it, I do point out the racial component of the COVID emergency that too few people who oppose the vaccines and dismiss the danger of the virus ever talked about. So now listen, I want to make clear right now that I am not saying that the arguments made about the way the vaccines were rolled out, how unfair the mask and vaccine mandates, and even the partial lockdowns were, and the lack of a coordinated government response to the well-being of the people during the pandemic should not have been had. I am not saying that at all. I want to make clear that the US government did not respond as it was well within its power to, and as other developed nations responded that produced significantly fewer deaths from COVID during the same period of time. Because under both administrations that spanned the pandemic, the response was garbage. Under Trump, we got blaming China for the outbreak, travel bans, and confusion on the need to wear masks to protect ourselves or not. But then under Biden, we did not get those things, that's true. But what we got was on the other end of the spectrum with mask and vaccine mandates that punish people with the loss of their jobs if they refuse. Neither administration did anything at the social level to protect the people during the global health emergency that other nations did. I mean, things like implementing a lockdown to keep people from congregating and spreading the virus, but providing no material support, no rent moratoriums. Remember how we had to fight for those? No access to food and medicine, where some countries like China literally mandated that these things be delivered to residents or that systems be put in place where vulnerable people could access local sources for these things in safe manners, or who were under lockdown, right? I think some Nordic countries actually mandated that nobody except the elderly could shop in grocery stores on certain days, and that their prices were greatly reduced for those people, and masks were still mandated on those days. This country did none of those things. And these kinds of efforts contained the virus and severely reduced its spread in countries where these policies were mandated. And as a result, in a country like China, with a population of over 1 billion people, billion with a B, they suffered far fewer deaths from COVID compared to more than 1 million people dead in the US, with a population of about 330 million. 330 million. And capitalist countries that followed the US's lead that did nothing to protect the people. This government did not have a comprehensive contact tracing system where they knew where the viral hotspots were. They were able to hospitalize or provide at-home treatment where possible for those who were infected. They monitored their health and that of those around them that could provide them the data necessary to respond to outbreaks in areas where new people tested positive. Other countries like China did this, the United States did not. To be clear, though, to be clear, dear listeners, I am saying that it is nasty work that the pharmaceutical companies made billions, probably trillions of dollars on the rollout of one vaccine from one or two companies in the US, and that the vaccine became the only government policy there was. The US government under Trump nor Biden made sure people kept their jobs, people kept their homes, that they weren't evicted. Neither administration protected lives during the pandemic, before or after the vaccine. Instead, the vaccine was pushed out to give low-wage workers some kind of psychotic incentive to feel safe, continuing to go to work to serve the country's capitalist bottomless pit of greed and corporate profit. While they were still forced to work, as people refused to wear masks to protect those workers because their freedom was more important than any collective concern for the lives of their fellow countrymen. And that's because this government was ensuring that capital did not succumb to the virus, no matter how many of us died from it. And the people in this country are not collective minded. People in this country do not and did not care about what happened to anybody else, because we are deeply indoctrinated with this idea of rugged individualism, to the point that if you died from the virus, it's your problem and your fault. And it has nothing to do with my freedom from the freedom from having to care about you. Here, exactly at this point, is where the problem with the way people in this country responded to this virus and who was dying from it. Because people on the right and the left embraced a form of eugenics logic, or is it eugenicist logic? I think it's eugenicist. Eugenicist logic that led them to believe and say things like the only people who die from the virus are the people who are already sick, who have comorbidities. Remember that? People are still saying this. They were going to die anyway from those comorbidities, is what some people said. Others said the comorbidities is what killed these people, not the virus. Even though those of us with pre-existing conditions who contracted the virus before the vaccines were alive until we contracted the virus, and that's what got people sick to the point of death, right? It didn't matter how much we explained this to people. No matter how much we argued against this natural selection kind of talk that caused even people on the left to support people like RFK Jr. and his racist eugenicist logic, those folks would not budge. Even as the studies that I talked about in my monologue from 2023, I don't know why I keep saying that, 2023 were published, proving that in the early stages of the virus, it was mostly working class and poor Black and brown people who were dying. White people across the political spectrum did not care when it was us. So they rejected masking even outside of mandates and condemned the vaccines, and even cursed at the people like me who chose to take them. Us protecting ourselves from near certain death if we contracted the virus was turned into a ridiculous litmus test among some on the left, in the same way that it spurred the anti-lockdown and anti-mask and anti-vaccine protests on the right. We on the left, who were among those who suffer from these comorbidities, these pre-existing conditions that are chronic and could more likely lead to death eventually, because I had kidney disease and I had chronic kidney disease, and I actually had end stage renal disease. So that when this thinking came into our orbit, when we were confronted with this eugenicist thinking that people are embracing eugenics, that people were arguing for eugenics. This is what we were trying to tell people. You not caring that it was sick people who were dying from COVID, so it didn't matter to you. And you saying that because of the problems with the way the vaccines were rolled out and the profit margin connected to the vaccines in this capitalist hellscape were real and existed, people turn that into the vaccines are wrong and people taking the vaccines are wrong. Never mind the fact that the vaccines actually kept us from dying from the virus, even if we contracted it with our comorbidities. None of that mattered. Our outrage and honestly, our terror, in many cases, it wasn't just ignored. Instead, we were mocked. So now here we are, as we're faced with RFK Jr. as the head of the Department of Health and Human Services in this administration, threatening what is being described as an autism registry. Now, he's claiming he's going to do all of this fantastic research on autism, but he's wanting to register people who have autism. And if you think he's going to stop at autism, you don't understand eugenics and you don't understand white supremacy. And that just proves that you didn't listen to us. And now all of a sudden, though, everybody understands what eugenics are. But when we tried to tell you that your argument against the need for lockdowns, masking, and vaccines, even as the criticism of the government's lack of protection for the people, were absolutely valid, you laughed at us. So now we have to make the connection between that COVID denialism and eugenics, because the support of RFK Jr. that he got from this crowd back then is exactly why this man is threatening to return institutionalized eugenics back to America now. So we are just about at 30 minutes past the hour, dear listeners and viewers, and that means it's time for a station break. Engineer extraordinaire, what's on tap for today?
WPFW has been a site of resistance in defense of truth, justice, and culture for 48 years. Our spring membership drive begins with a special celebration of James Brown's birthday, May 3rd, and closes with a centennial birthday celebration of Malcolm X on May 19th. Two pillars of music and message. Your financial sustenance is needed more than ever to continue this type of programming. As a new listener or current member, this is your opportunity to contribute to the growth of an institution that stands resolute against both gross injustice and repression and the mass erasure of history and culture by amplifying the voices of scholars, artists, and activists whose work centers the humanity of all people. That's 48 years of being a site of resistance in defense of truth, justice, and culture. May 3rd through the 19th. WPFW works daily to build the world we want to inhabit by building a better world, one broadcast at a time.
Thank you so much. That's a fantastic sounding event. And now let's get back to this discussion about how COVID and vaccine denialism and a particular political ideology are connected to eugenics and fooled a lot of people on the left and the right into supporting it. Because eugenics and COVID-19 denialism are connected through overlapping ideological frameworks, particularly in far right and extremist movements that promote pseudoscience, conspiracy theories, and opposition to public health measures. And here are some ways that they are interconnected. The first is in the historical roots of pseudoscience and anti-government ideology. Eugenics was a pseudoscientific movement that sought to improve the human population through selective breeding, and it was often tied to racist and ableist ideologies. Eugenics was widely practiced in the United States in the early 20th century, supported by scientists, politicians, and even the Supreme Court and its rulings. And there are some examples of how eugenics was implemented in the US that I bet you didn't know that I want to tell you right now, that often targeted marginalized groups under the guise of improving the population. How about forced sterilization laws? Yeah, Buck versus Bell in 1927, when the US Supreme Court upheld Virginia's forced sterilization laws. Oh, you didn't know Virginia had forced sterilization laws? Yes, they did, leading to the sterilization of one Carrie Buck, a young woman falsely deemed feeble-minded. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes infamously wrote, quote, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough," end quote. This ruling opened the door for over 60,000 forced sterilizations in 32 states in this country, mostly targeting poor, disabled, Black, Indigenous, and immigrant women. Stop telling me we don't have anything in common or connecting us to other people. The racism and the hatred of this country absolutely connects us all. Oh, how about California's sterilization program from 1909 to 1979? California led the US in forced sterilizations with 20,000 operations, many performed on inmates, people with disabilities, and Mexican American women. Some victims were as young as 13. Or how about North Carolina's Eugenics Board? Oh, y'all didn't know North Carolina had a eugenics board. Oh, honey, from 1929 to 1974, the North Carolina Eugenics Board targeted Black women that made up 60% of later victims and poor whites for sterilization under the pretense of welfare reform. Words have meaning, y'all. How about this? Immigration restrictions that are based on eugenics. The Immigration Act of 1924, also known as the Johnson-Reed Act, severely restricted immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe, Asia, and Africa, and it was influenced by eugenicists like Harry Laughlin, who argued that these groups were genetically inferior. And of course, the anti-miscegenation laws or racial purity laws. Or did you really think that had anything to do with white people not wanting their little daughters to? No, it had everything to do with eugenics. Many states banned interracial marriage to maintain racial purity, a core eugenicist belief. These laws were not fully struck down until Loving versus Virginia, which was decided in 1967. So the Loving decision is not just about the right to marry who the heck you want. The Loving decision ended eugenics laws connected to miscegenation laws, institutionalization, and feeble-minded labeling. State asylums and schools for the feeble-minded. Thousands of disabled people, especially those with intellectual disabilities, epilepsy, or mental illness, were institutionalized to keep them from reproducing. An example is the Lynchburg colony in Virginia. Virginia sterilized over 4,000 people between 1920 and 1972 under these institutionalization laws. There was an American Eugenics Society, and prominent supporters founded it in 1926, included influential figures like Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood founder, who supported eugenics to limit undesirable births, though she later distanced herself from the movement. And of course, I have to take a little aside here, dear listeners and viewers, and point out that the right of Black women to control our own bodies and births is innate in our humanity. Women have been deciding when to and when not to have children since women have existed and were having children. Margaret Sanger did not give that right to us. So Margaret Sanger, being a eugenicist, does not take that right away. And never forget that Planned Parenthood provides more healthcare services like cervical and breast cancer screening, HIV screening and prevention and treatment, and even reproductive health care screenings like testicular cancer screenings for men. They provide more of that than they do provide abortions today. So keep Planned Parenthood out your mouth and leave women to decide what to do with our bodies. Thank you very much. Oh, I have to tell you that there's another way the US inspired the Nazis, and it was from the US eugenics movement. Hitler praised US eugenics laws in his book Mein Kampf, and the Nazis used the Buck versus Bell ruling to justify their 1933 forced sterilization law. Involuntary sterilizations in the 21st century included those that were carried out in California prisons from 2006 to 2010, where over 150 female inmates were sterilized without proper consent. ICE detention centers, and this is from a 2020 report, there are allegations of hysterectomies performed on detained immigrant women without their consent. So these are the ways that eugenics in the US were deeply tied to racism, ableism, and classism, with lasting impacts on marginalized communities. And many policies were not repealed until the 1970s or later, and some abuses continue today under different justifications. So COVID-19 denialism similarly rejects mainstream science in favor of conspiracy theories, like claims that the pandemic was a hoax or that vaccines are a form of population control with all of their unknown ingredients that are causing all kinds of crazy side effects. Both movements often distrust government and scientific institutions. And look, I'm not saying that we should implicitly trust them. We should rigorously question what they say. But the problem is that people go beyond questioning the official government narrative, and then they go farther and claim that public health measures are the problem and that they are oppressive. Then there are the conspiracy theories about population control through either the virus or the vaccine, because some COVID-19 deniers and anti-vaccine activists have claimed that the vaccines are part of a globalist or elitist plot to depopulate the world. And that's the Great Reset conspiracy theory. And this mirrors eugenicists' fears of forced sterilization or genetic manipulation through COVID denialists or through the anti-vaccine folks who repurpose these ideas to oppose those vaccines rather to support them, which to me is kind of interesting, because the fear of forced sterilization that the master race, the so-called master race, has, that leads them to implement forced sterilization of other people who they claim are trying to breed them out of existence. It's just circular illogic of the fevered mind of the white supremacists. That's what this is. And then, of course, there are the far right and white supremacist overlaps in modern day eugenics aligned groups that have promoted COVID denialism, arguing that lockdowns and vaccines threaten their vision of a pure or a strong population, which is why so many people didn't care that it was so-called sick people dying from the virus, or as many people said directly to me, the weak. Some extremists even embrace natural selection rhetoric. That's all this whole argument has been about. Only people with comorbidities die from the virus. That's what this is. Suggesting that COVID-19 would weed out the weak, which is a parallel to social Darwinism in eugenics. And this is the argument we tried for years to convey to the COVID vaccine deniers on the left, to little to no avail. It's many of those people who openly supported RFK Jr.'s bid for the Democratic nomination against Joe Biden, no matter how much we said that President RFK would be as dangerous to us as President Biden. And here we are. Opposition to public health as government overreach is a part of this ideology where eugenicists historically supported state control over reproduction, forced sterilizations. And today we can look at the argument against abortion, while COVID deniers oppose state mandated health measures like masks and vaccines. But both ideologies share a belief in controlling bodies, whether through coercive breeding policies or resisting public health mandates in the name of freedom. And again, I can't help but make this point again and again. These same people who oppose public health measures because they think it's government overreach also have no problem with the government controlling women's bodies or the disabled bodies or the mentally ill and their bodies, or those of us with pre-existing conditions and our bodies. And the way they are fine with the government forcing women's bodies under the government control is to force them to have more children, more white children, white women. They're fine with the government forcing white women to produce more white children to destroy the great replacement theory that they have, of course. And we see this playing out through Trump and his ideas to promote rewarding women. What he means is white women who have 6 children to get a national medal of motherhood, I get. That's all this is. So their arguments are not, and they never have been, about bodily autonomy or stopping government overreach, but about them using the government and institutional power to limit reproduction of undesirables like you and me. And then there's the misuse of science, and here's the politics: libertarian individualism. Eugenics distorted genetics to justify hierarchy, while COVID denialism cherry picks or misinterprets data to oppose vaccines. Both movements often appeal to libertarian ideas: eugenics in improving the gene pool, COVID denialism in rejecting collective health measures. Why the connection to libertarianism? Well, because libertarianism, by definition and its own principles, is a political and philosophical ideology that prioritizes individual freedom, minimal government intervention, and personal responsibility above collective or state control. It's rooted in classical liberalism, but takes a more extreme stance against state authority. And the core beliefs of libertarian individualism are maximum personal freedom. Individuals should have the right to live as they choose, as long as they don't harm others, but they always manage to want to harm others. They oppose laws that restrict personal behavior like drug use, consensual sex, and speech. And that's a good thing. That's fine, because there should be no laws that circumvent free speech, and you should stay out of other people's bedrooms. But again, libertarians always take it way too far to let's get rid of the people who don't think like we do. Libertarians believe in minimal government, that government should only protect against force, fraud, and theft. So libertarians are fine with the police, they're fine with the courts, and they're fine with the military. But they reject welfare, they reject public health care, and they reject economic regulation as infringements on their personal liberty. And they support free market capitalism. Libertarians are capitalists, y'all. They're not your friends. They oppose taxation, subsidies, and government interference in the economy. I don't have a problem with taxes if my taxes go to supporting the well-being of everyone in this country. But we know that's not how our taxes are used today. Libertarians believe private enterprise and voluntary exchanges are morally superior, so they do not believe in minimum wage, and they do not believe in labor laws. Libertarians believe self-ownership and property rights are ultimate. They are over everything else. Your body and labor belong solely to you, which is the basis for their opposition to conscription, which is great, and mandatory vaccinations, which sometimes is great, but sometimes is dangerous. But the way this country rolled out the mandatory vaccinations under COVID-19 was a problem, not because the vaccinations were mandatory, but because that's all the government did, and the government punished you if you didn't take the vaccine, and that is a problem. This is the proper use of the word nuance in a discussion. This was the nuance that we could not have when we talked about the vaccine and mask mandates, that people just refused to have. And that's why we're where we are now. Libertarians also believe strongly in private property rights. They don't believe in zoning laws. They believe that private property is ultimate above all things, probably second only to individual liberty. And libertarians also have a deep skepticism of collective authority. They don't trust democracy if it leads to a tyranny of the majority, right? Which means they don't believe in taxation for social programs. That's what they mean. They reject public health mandates because they believe there are violations of their bodily autonomy, right? So when people say to me that they believe in the ideas of democracy according to John Locke or Adam Smith, I know they're libertarians, and I know they are dangerous to me, because John Locke is a historical influence of libertarianism. He kind of framed or documented this natural right to life, liberty, and not pursuit of happiness, y'all. Property, natural rights to life, liberty, and property. And then there's Adam Smith, who is connected with the foundation of the free market as the legitimate source of prosperity. But you know who else is included in the historical influence of libertarianism? I don't even know how to pronounce this crazy woman's name. Ayn Rand, A-Y-N, you know, the crazy lady who wrote Atlas Shrugged. She coined this idea of radical individualism and the rejection of altruism. We're only here to do for ourselves, and what happens to anybody else is not our problem nor our concern. So modern libertarian movements in the US are, of course, represented by the Libertarian Party. And they advocate for ending drug prohibition, abolishing income tax, and dismantling most federal agencies. So for libertarians, what Doge is doing right now is a great thing. And if Trump pushes to abolish income tax, that would also be a fantastic thing for them. And the fact that social programs and people will be directly harmed by that, they don't care. Ron Paul and the Tea Party were a manifestation of this libertarian thinking, this small government conservatives with libertarian leanings. So yes, libertarianism is connected to GOP conservatism. And of course, you've got the Silicon Valley tech libertarians who oppose regulation on big tech. They oppose regulation on cryptocurrencies. People like Peter Thiel, and guess who? Elon Musk. Then you've got the sovereign citizen extremists who believe they are exempt from government laws, which is a distortion of libertarianism, but it comes from there anyway. And of course, as I've tried to point out, libertarianism is problematic. It's dangerous because it ignores systemic inequality. And as people on the left began to support RFK Jr. back then, we saw this emerge as you saw more and more folks on the so-called left sound more and more like folks on the so-called right, not caring about why more Black and brown people were dying from the virus and why we needed that vaccine probably more than anybody. Even understanding how problematic the rollout of the vaccine was, right? Then you've got people who don't believe in safety nets, people who reject welfare, reject public health care. They're fine with leaving vulnerable people like me and a lot of you without any kind of support from this government that we pay taxes to. They believe in corporate power over people. They don't want corporations to have regulations. They like monopolies. And exploitation is fine with them so that people can make as much profit as they want. Which people? Well, not you and me. They oppose mandates, obviously. And sometimes, yes, they can harm society. There should have been a mask mandate. There should have been lockdowns. We needed the vaccine, but we also needed a coordinated, holistic, full society government response to take care of the material needs of the people at the same time these mandates were implemented. And we did not get that. Libertarians didn't want it. They were happy with the 1 million plus people who died because that's natural selection, you know. So we are looking at the result of this libertarian infused political landscape. And I'm pointing out libertarianism because RFK Jr. is a libertarian. And I recall warning y'all about those people in another article I wrote in Black Agenda Report a few years ago about the Rage Against the War Machine rally and their Libertarian Party organizers that many on the so-called left also attacked me viciously for. And you got people on the left listening to folks like Alex Jones, libertarian, supporting people who were white supremacists, people who blended eugenics adjacent ideas with COVID conspiracy theories. All of this stuff, we lived through all of this mess. And no matter how hard we tried to explain to people, particularly on the left, now I'm talking to and about people on the left, because, listen, y'all need to gather y'all folks on the right. That's your job. Non-Black and brown people listening to me, watching me right now. Y'all need to gather y'all people. You need to talk to the truckers against mandates. You need to talk to the anti-vax. You need to talk to the Libertarian Tea Party members. That they're your people. You need to talk to them. I am talking to those on the left who fell under the sway of this hateful, evil, genocidal garbage. While eugenics and COVID denialism are not identical, I hope that I've shown you that they do share a foundation in pseudoscience, conspiracy thinking, and opposition to collective welfare. Both have been weaponized by extremist movements to promote ideological agendas under the guise of science or freedom. That is what got us here. And a lot of people on the left who believed that RFK Jr. was their man because he spoke for what they believed about the vaccine, about the virus, and about the people who were most susceptible and vulnerable to dying from the virus. Y'all helped RFK get to where he is now. The head of the Department of Health and Human Services promoting the idea of a registry for autistic people under the guise that he is going to carry out this great study to find out the root causes of autism, when really all he's doing is reviving US eugenics. That's what got us here, folks. And my question, as we wrap up this show on this Friday at the end of this Holy Week, my question for you, as it always is now that you know this, what are you going to do about it? I am out of time for today, but stay tuned for News Views with Garland Nixon and all of the fantastic music shows that come after him on this network, the mighty WPFW 89.3 FM in the Washington, D.C. area, where we are changing the world. One broadcast, one show, this show at a time. This is Jackie Lukman, and you have been listening to Darker Than Blue. And I say to you, a luta continua. This struggle continues. But if we keep fighting, I promise you, if we keep fighting, if we keep learning our history, if we keep connecting it to our current struggles today, and if we struggle together, I promise you, Victoria Acerta, victory is certain. Peace. All right, folks. I am going to do a very, very quick dark room. Let me adjust my little stuff here. Let me not adjust my stuff because I'm breaking things now. Okay, no adjusting. Because I'm going to break some stuff. No adjusting. All right, let me move back over. And I do have to make a tiny, there we go. Okay, here we go. So this is going to be quick because I've just had to deal with a big old adjustment in my medication. Because, as I said, I have chronic kidney disease, and you don't stop having chronic kidney disease or kidney disease once you have a transplant. It is a treatment, but I will always have chronic kidney disease. I will always have to have my kidney levels and functions monitored. I will always have to take immunosuppressants for the rest of my life. The doctors describe it as for the rest of the life of the kidney, which I hope is the rest of my life. And I hope this transplanted kidney lasts for another 30, 40 years. But I want to say, when I'm doing Darker Than Blue, I really cannot look at the chat over here on Black Liberation Media, because I have a whole script that I in order for me to do a whole show and end on time, I have to have a script, and I cannot get distracted by things that people are saying in the chat. But I knew what people were going to do. I knew what was going to happen. As soon as I talked about COVID, I knew people were going to come on here and start sharing their fucking COVID vaccine conspiracies. I don't give a damn. I don't care about how you feel about the vaccine. I honestly do not. The discussions we should have had, that we were trying to have, that we were really trying so hard to get people to see, was not necessarily that the vaccines were poison. Because from what I understand, and again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a biochemist, I could be totally wrong on this, but a bunch of countries use the same mRNA technology to develop their own vaccines. And the vaccines that were developed in this country were shared with some other countries. Now, there were vaccines that were created in other countries that were developed from different technologies, and that's fine. That's fine. Yes, there have been some side effects connected to the vaccine in some people, but there are side effects if you take Tylenol or not Tylenol, what is it? Aleve. There are side effects if you take Aleve. Do you understand? Oh, you probably don't understand because you are the perfect picture of health, and you don't have comorbidities. So you don't know that for kidney patients, NSAIDs, pain medications like Aleve, I think it's Motrin, lidocaine, any kind of lidocaine based anything that is actually really bad for you. That will destroy your kidneys. By the way, did you know that even if you don't have kidney disease, if you take too much Aleve for too long, that will destroy your kidneys and you will develop chronic kidney disease. So I understand that there are serious questions about the vaccines. There are absolutely valid criticisms that need to be had about the money, the profit motive for the government only focusing on the development of the vaccines and not doing any of the other things for the people that I've said at least twice in the last hour. I think I think that's valid. But I also think it's valid how the United States did not share for free its life-saving technology with developing nations, but countries like China and Cuba did. Right? So listen, you can feel however you want to feel about the vaccine and what it means for you. If you sat there and read all of those dense scientific studies and those medical journals with, all of those reports and all the, okay, cool. But you really expect me to trust you to interpret scientific data better than the scientists when you don't even know that your kidneys can be liquefied if you pop 4 Motrin 3 times a day for 10 years. Get the hell out of here. So yes, there were people in here, and I let me go up and see because I really do want to. There were people in here before I even said the first thing. They're in here talking about the vaccine is the worst thing that ever, blah blah blah. Well, before the vaccines were anywhere near being completed, thank you for pointing that out, JXY. Jaxie, thanks for pointing that out. Ibuprofen can fuck you up too. People losing their mind over the side effects from the vaccine, and I'm not. Okay, I am laughing at it because it is just absurd to me. It is absolutely absurd to me the lengths that people went to demonize people who supported the vaccine, or at least. And it wasn't even like a full-throated support of the vaccine. At least not for me. It was like, look, it's likely that I might catch this virus because I live with my husband. He's a truck driver. His job was not subject to the lockdown, right? So he still had to go to work. And sometimes, knucklehead that he was, thinking that, look, I'm in this truck by myself. Sometimes he told me sometimes I would just forget. I would take my mask off when I was in the truck. And if I would get out and go to a store, I would forget to put my mask back on. You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff. So when the vaccines were developed, and I'm thinking, yeah, I don't trust this government. I don't trust these people, but I also don't want to die from COVID. Because do we remember what people who died from COVID and their families had to endure? Do we remember people having to die in isolation tents, surrounded by plastic sheeting, only being contacted by medical staff who were in full containment gear, and they couldn't even have their families at their bedside as they died? They had to have the last word from their family, the last sight their family had of their dying loved one was through tablets and cell phones that the hospital staff held up for the dying person to see. You didn't give a fuck about that. And the crazy thing was, when I realized that people were serious about the things they were saying about the virus, and only people who had comorbidities were dying, so the rest of us weren't at risk, which translated to, I don't give a fuck about you sick, weak motherfuckers dying from this virus that is naturally selecting your asses. We're going to be better off without you. What I realized then was, y'all were fine with that happening to me. Of course you were, if you didn't give a shit about it happening to anybody else. So people in the chat right now talking about Anthony Fauci and covered up don't give a shit. That's not what I am talking about. And you know damn well it's not what I'm talking about. I made it very clear. And this has been the problem on the left for much longer than this COVID thing has been around. It's 5-6 years. This has been a problem on the left, and this is why the left in this country is as weak as it is, because the left has a racism and a classism problem. I think the racism problem is probably bigger than the classism problem, because, you know, folks on the left swear up and down that they're anti-capitalist, but they did not want to listen to us when we told them that working class and poor people, but especially working class and poor Black and brown people, were being sacrificed at the altar of capitalist profit during the COVID vaccine. And that did not convince a lot of so-called anti-capitalists on the left from supporting people like RFK Jr. and other people on the right who peddled these eugenicist ideas and then weaponized them against people like me, like folks are doing. So I look, you know what? The vaccine was never supposed to stop the spread of the virus. The vaccine did exactly what it did for me. It didn't let the virus kill me. And I swear to God, if you can't get that, stop coming on my show. Because it's clear that my life is not important to you, because that's what I'm talking about. I am talking about collective care of our people that the left did not exhibit, and you're still not. Thank you for proving my point. And if it seems like I'm getting a little upset, I am, because I spent years having people that I have worked with in the past, people that I thought were comrades, people that I thought were friends, basically tell me, fuck you. If you die from the virus, then you were supposed to die from the virus. That's not my problem, because Anthony Fauci lied, because HHS lied, because this, because that, because... I'm not talking about how the vaccine was developed. I'm not talking about what the research was. I'm not talking about what Anthony Fauci did or did not do, what he did or did not say. I'm not talking about any of that. I said what I said, and I was clear in what I said. And the fact that people will continue to hijack a discussion as important and critical to our very existence as this ought to show you how dangerous some folks on the so-called left really are and how fucked up the left really is. So please continue to have whatever feelings you do have about Fauci, about the pharmaceutical companies, about the virus, about China, about the Wuhan lab leak, about the gain of function. Y'all learned a new phrase and you just kept using it all kinds of out of context, trying to sound smart, but sounding like a fucking libertarian eugenicist. Talking about the gain of function shows. You never knew what the hell that meant. Some right-wing crackpot used it in his screed against the virus, the people who were dying from the virus, and the vaccine that saved some people's lives. And you just use it all the time now. And I'm supposed to give a damn about what you have to say. When you refuse to listen to what I have to say when it comes to my life and my safety and my experience and the experience of people like me. So it's not just a my lived experience thing. It's a look at all of the people who do have comorbidities, pre-existing conditions, who would have been hospitalized with severe illness that could very well have led to death, but who didn't suffer that fate because the vaccines did what they were supposed to do. We can't have that discussion because all y'all want to talk about is all the conspiracy theory shit about the virus and the vaccine. So yeah, thank you. I'm not going to get my blood pressure up again about this. But it really bothers me. And I'm going to end on this. I told you it was going to be short because I'm tired. I realize that my magnesium is very low. That's kind of common with kidney disease patients anyway. When you have a kidney failure, your magnesium tends to be low. And my magnesium was low, along with all of the other minerals in my body during dialysis, when I was on dialysis, because dialysis clears everything out of your blood. So you have to do a lot of supplementation to stay healthy. And you have to have a very healthy diet when you are on dialysis. And now that I've had a kidney transplant, magnesium levels are still an issue, even though I have a functioning kidney, right? So now I have to go back to protein powders to increase my protein because I don't want to eat a whole lot of meat anymore. That's just, my appetite has changed drastically because of the dialysis and the transplant. I only crave foods that the kidney can easily break down. That's what it is. That's why when you have a kidney transplant, you have those kind of cravings for starch and vegetables, because your kidney can break those down. And really, that's kind of what it needs. So you might be prone to eat less meat, which has happened with me. So now I have to increase my protein and I have to take magnesium supplements again. And the magnesium supplements might help with the insomnia that is made worse by the dialysis and the kidney transplant and the underlying chronic kidney disease. So the magnesium will also help relax my muscles. So I have to deal with that. And that was just this week, where I had to go to the doctor because I didn't understand why I felt like crap after just driving to Baltimore and going to an event and driving back. And by Wednesday, I felt like I had not recovered. I had to go to the doctor. They took the did the special, whatever they called it, test, and woo, your magnesium is low. Let's fix that. So last night was the first night that I had a pretty decent night of sleep, even though I still tossed and turned more than I had been. for a while. And thank God I actually do garden, because I have been known to, while I'm out there gardening, just tending to my little plants, rip off some collard leaves and wash them off and stuff them right in my mouth. I didn't know that was my body just craving that, but I love that stuff anyway. So I was just like, okay, I'm just being weird. But no, that was literally my kidney like, hey, we need those. Give me those. Give me those green things. So here I am still managing a comorbidity, a chronic health condition. Now, this one, if I take care of myself, actually will not kill me. It'll just be chronic. It's something that I have to stay on top of forever, for the rest of my life. That's what a chronic condition is. A chronic condition doesn't necessarily mean that it's eventually going to kill you. Because honestly, life is a chronic condition, if that's what we're calling a chronic condition, because all of us gonna die. We all gonna die. Right? So just because someone has hypertension, which is a chronic condition, it does not mean that the hypertension will kill them if they manage the hypertension and their health. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this idea of only people with comorbidities dying from COVID, first of all, that was a lie. And second, the idea that when people who have comorbidities died from COVID, then you had people saying, well, no, people didn't die from COVID, they died from the comorbidity. The disregard of the lives of disabled people expressed by the left has been horrifying. And I have been angry about it the whole fucking time. I will never not be angry about the way some folks on the so-called left refused to have a conversation about the actual problems with the mandates and the vaccines, but they pivoted to this right-wing libertarian eugenicist argument about only sick and weak people die from the virus, so why should I care about a vaccine? And now you have the nerve to be all up in arms about RFK suggesting an autism registry. Why? Why are you mad at eugenics now? You were cool with eugenics when it was us being eliminated. Now you scared. You know why? Because you know damn well you'll probably be on that register. You will probably be in the registry, because I can't think of any other reason. I cannot think of any other reason why we've been trying to have this conversation about the actual issues, but a whole bunch of other shit keeps coming in. You must not be able to pay attention too well. Is that a comorbidity you have? Do you have ADHD? Oh, because if you think he's only going to start tracking people with autism, you ought to hear what RFK Jr. has to say about ADHD. Your registry is next. So, all right now. That's the dark room for this week. I'm going to go eat something, even though I'm not hungry, because I got to eat something. Yes, Leah, it's magnesium powder that they have me on, along with protein powder to increase my protein. I didn't think I could eat more greens than I was eating, but yes, I can. And you know what? All kinds of different greens from all kinds of different cultures. I love going to the international store because they have greens and vegetables that we don't know anything about here. I had spinach in Colombia, was the that was the most delicious, meaty, substantial, thick. Oh, it was amazing. It's not like that little weak sauce spinach we got here. I like to go to the international store and get the ceballo green onions, the big green onions with the nice big, but I'm also growing a monster green onion in my garden, where I've been clipping off the leaves and just using the leaves in food, just trying to see, what's going to happen if more leaves are going to grow, or if the green onion is going to become sentient and take over my house. I'm just trying to see. Green beans, I don't know. I didn't think I could eat more green beans than I eat. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. Did you know that you can grate vegetables that you're not crazy about? Like if you don't really like cauliflower, you can grate it, mix it with other vegetables that you do like carrots, shredded carrots, grated broccoli, chopped peppers, and leafy things. Roll it up in a batter, to mix it up in a make a little patty out of it, and fry that joint, and have a vegetable fritter that will blow your mind. Blow your mind. I'm trying to help some of y'all get your vegetables in. You can blend. Thank you, Albert. You can blend vegetables that you don't like to eat, buy them, so you can put them in your protein shake. If you make a protein shake every day, you can blend it. You can't taste it. You cannot taste cauliflower. And you can get the frozen kind. You don't even have to get the fresh kind. You can get the frozen kind and put the little frozen chunks of vegetables right in that blender, and you get your daily nutrients for all of your vegetables. And, if you're like me, you can, just stick stuff in your mouth while you're in the grocery store. I did that the other day, and I did it without even thinking. I was just kind of running around, had to run to the store, replenish my vegetables, and I'm picking through my bunches of collards, because my collards have not matured yet. Picking through my bunches of collards, and I ripped one right off the little thing, and because they had the mister on, put it under the mister, washed it off a little bit, roll that sucker up, and people were looking at me like, the damn weirdo. We do that with grapes. We don't do that with collards, but I do it with collards. So I've had to find different ways, new ways to increase my intake of the food that I need to keep this kidney healthy, so that I can live, so that the kidney can live another 40 years. If I want to be around that long. I don't know if I want to be around that long. Good God. Seeing the way things are going now, I don't think any of us, I don't think I want to see it, but I'm just saying. But as I wrap this up, I just want to, again, just reiterate, I don't do these shows because I don't have anything else to do. I'm not doing that. I'm actually not even doing this to make money, because I don't. So I mean, if y'all would like to help me out, I would appreciate it if you go over to patreon.com/LuqManNation, LuqMannation, and become a patron and help me out every month. I would really appreciate that. But I don't do this to make money. I don't do this because I have nothing better to do. I don't do this for the attention. I do this because we are at war. And everything I talk about is an aspect of the ways we are being waged war upon. And I tell you by who, and I tell you how. But when people come in and want to take the conversation somewhere where I am not going, that does kind of piss me off. And it does kind of reflect a lack of respect for me and the work I do and the effort I put into it. But it also, I think, which is a bigger problem, reflects a lack of concern for humanity at large. Because if we can't get community right on the left, if we can't care about each other on the left, there is no saving humanity that the left is going to contribute to. We're all going to go down the drain with the right, the way this conversation is going. That's why it pisses me off. Not because not because I have a personal thing against you, but because your refusal to stick to the topic and try to make this conversation something that you want to talk about, that is not connected to the very clear points that I'm making, that means that you're kind of a narcissist, and narcissists are dangerous to everybody. So that's what I gotta say. That's all I'm gonna say for right now, because if I say any more, it's gonna get ugly. I'm gonna go eat my vegetables, and I will see you all on the internet sometime this week, or next week, rather. Until then, until next time, peace, y'all. Honestly, if you are willing to fight for it, because some of you just ain't. Yeah, I don't know. All right, bye.